now listening to Protecting Your Nest with board-certified family medicine and obesity medicine specialist Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com. Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. When I think about my life, I sometimes feel like I'm on a roller coaster. Some days I feel up and can face any challenge in front of me, and other days I feel overwhelmed and that life is one big struggle. That's because when I think I figured it out, life will throw me a curveball I'm not expecting when it comes my way. So if you feel like this sometimes, then I guess you're not alone. And since this is our reality, we must think of ways of how to face the roller coaster ride without fear. Because whether or not we like roller coasters, ups and downs are just a fact of life. Everyone has to face their own set of challenges that come from the ups and downs of life. So, as a lesson to you, here are some of the ways I've overcome some of the challenges I've faced over the years. Number one, thinking about my potential struggles and having some type of plan when I'm faced with them. Number two, accepting that struggle is just a part of life. Number three, not being afraid to ask for help when I need it. Number four, focusing on the big picture. And number five, keeping a positive mindset no matter what. Today, I want to have a conversation with a guest who was able to make changes when he faced struggle and who is now coaching others to do the same. Today's guest is Vernon Masongsong. Vernon is a Bilingual Nutrition Network certified health coach and a Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners certified health practitioner. He's also the founder of Transparent Health and Fitness, where they embrace the power of science to deliver undeniable results in reclaiming metabolic health and even reverse type 2 diabetes in those who use their services. They do this by using an animal-based keto lifestyle combined with holistic approaches to unlock the full potential of the clients they work with. Today, Vernon will share how he was able to transform from his previously unfit body to one he could be proud of, and he's going to share how he achieved that. So, Vernon, I appreciate you. And thank you for coming to the Protecting Your Nest podcast.
Thank you for having me on, Tony. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. We've had a chance to connect and meet at the Symposium for Metabolic Health in San Diego. I think I've spoken there 3 or 4 times. I think I'm actually on my 4th speaking moment. I think maybe one was virtual because of COVID. And I really learn a ton there. And I just appreciate connecting with like-minded individuals. I'm really excited that you've kind of joined the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, learned all the principles that we all had to learn, and are now spreading this holistic message to others, because there's so many people who, when I meet people at clinic, like I had today, it's almost like I'm starting all over again with every single person. They have heard nothing of what I'm saying. They don't believe that disease can be reversed. They think it's just their destiny. It's my family history, and it is what it is. And then when you start talking about how to do a better job and reverse these things, they're like deers in the headlight, and it's almost like they don't believe you. But the good news is that they're very motivated, and because they've been looking for hope, and nobody's actually offered them hope until that moment. So I really appreciate you providing hope and coaching, which it may be the most important thing people need other than the knowledge, and just joining this low carb community. So let's get started with my audience getting to know you a little bit. And let's start by you sharing what your day job was before you started to focus on coaching keto dietary patterns.
Oh, great question. My day job actually is night job, blackjack dealer. I deal cards at a casino.
Whew. I
taking
know.
people's money for a living.
Ah, that's really funny. When I was in Vicksburg, Mississippi, with my wife, we were visiting, taking care of some of her financial issues with her dad, and it was like that casino. It's just like it's like a magnet for people. And of course, if we have discipline and we can go down there and do our thing for a short time, that's fine. It is a form of entertainment, but man, I tell you, when you look at the faces of some of those folks, it's crazy. So that is very interesting that that's where we have some relatives too. In fact, some of the relatives that have done that type of work actually grew up in Mississippi as well. I think it was in Port Gibson, and they actually have had a career doing that type of work as well. So it's very interesting to hear you say that that's where you started. And I guess the next question is, when you started this whole, you started to make some dietary changes, what health issues were you trying to fix?
The health issues was I attained that carb belly. I
Mm,
mean, I never was diagnosed with any health issues per se because I was in my 30s when it begun.
mm-hmm,
Late 20s to early 30s is when I could start to see that I was starting to gain weight.
mm-hmm,
And so I was never diagnosed, but I knew that there was something not going good with me.
mm-hmm,
And I've always been an exercise guy since middle school when I started lifting weights, and I never stopped. So throughout all those years, I was eating the processed foods, just thinking like everybody else because everybody else is eating it. You look at that as that's food.
mm-hmm,
It's just regular food. If they sell it, well, it must be good. It must be a decent food. So when I began to have my own job and work, then I started eating fast food all the time. I was never really a big sweets guy per se, but the snacks and not knowing anything, just thinking chips and all that stuff is just food.
right.
So you just eat it like everybody else does all day long. So when I got towards my late 30s, the heaviest I got was 215 pounds, around that ballpark. And I had big love handles, the big wraparound belly. It was all there. My face was inflamed. And then the other key factor I forgot to mention, and this is a big one, is alcoholism.
Mm, mm,
It started as a sleep aid. Go back to my career as a blackjack dealer working nights.
mm,
I would get home around 5, 6 a.m. and I'd have my nightcap, have a couple drinks, and go to sleep. So that little routine that I started to create became a habit. And it, over time, just like all the addictions, you need more and more to keep going. And so that addiction turned into alcoholism and drinking on my days off, and then needing, not just needing, I would need to drink to fall asleep,
mm,
to like shut my brain off so I stopped thinking. So that
mm,
was a vicious cycle that I ended up repeating for many years. And it took hitting, rock bottom for me to make a real change. I quit one time when my first daughter was born for about 6 months, and then I tried having a beer in Cancun, and then boom, it set me off again, and I was back doing what I used to do, and that was really a learning moment to see that I don't have that moderation cycle circuit in my brain for alcohol. For me, it's either go all the way or not. And It took me being severely dehydrated and going to the emergency room and getting an IV to really check myself, because at that point I was like, my daughters, my family need me. What am I doing here? This could be taken away, and I'm responsible. I need to be the man. I wasn't being the man for my family, and that really checked me. And from that point, I was able to make the change. That was one of the big first steps.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next first step was the paleo diet. I got information for that, and that basically goes back to eating whole foods, nuts, protein. They're not so much against the carbohydrate intake, as long as it's whole foods.
Right.
And with that, I was able to lose a ton of weight, about 50 pounds. But I still hadn't achieved optimal metabolic health at that point, but I didn't know this. And so then this goes to the next part of my journey, which was podcasts like this one that we're doing right now. In particular, it was the Joe Rogan podcast with Paul Saladino. He went on there and started talking about his book, The Carnivore Code, and all the successes he's had with it. And I got the book, I read it. On paper, it makes sense. It logically made sense to me. But still, the programming that I've been programmed in my mind from school, teachers, mainstream media, all that stuff's been programmed in my head socially to believe that plants are the way out and low fat is the way and cholesterol is bad and salt is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Red meat causes cancer. All that stuff's been inserted and programmed into my head. So even though I'm reading this book that is backed by studies and science, I was still having my doubts. But I decided to take the leap, take the journey, and go all in with it. And at that time, I was doing just red meat, mostly salt and water. I did the strict carnivore way.
Yep.
And with that, oh man, that was like the missing link. The abs that I thought it was genetically impossible to have. I just thought, oh, my body type, I can't have abs. It just, no, it's not the case. It's just the way you eat allows your body to either use the fat as fuel or it doesn't.
Wow.
And with the carnivore way, it took me to the next level of attaining all the goals that I had always wished for myself. And that's really what sparked it, was myself. And I was still scared about my blood. So I've gotten, for the last 3 years, I have every 4 months blood work checked. And thankfully, I have a doctor who would order everything that I requested, because I was definitely out of the ordinary to ask for all these things that they don't normally ask for. But I just wanted to be sure that even though I look good on the outside, I wanted to make sure that everything on the inside was just going well. And it turns out now, 3 years later, I've had the best blood work I've ever had, as long as you discount the LDL, of course.
Of course. Well, that's a great testimonial. And when an audience, when he said, of course, don't worry about the LDL, because when you get training in metabolic health, you'll notice that the LDL and total cholesterol is not even mentioned. So you don't even have to focus on that. If we worry about it, we do particle sizes. So we look at the small and large particles, and usually when you do low carb, keto, carnivore, your small particles go down and maybe your large particles go up, which is the type of change you're comfortable with. Vernon mentioned alcohol, and I know a lot about alcohol. I've seen a lot of that over the years in my family. And the reason why that's important beyond the obvious is the principle of oxidative priority. And what that talks about is the priority in which your body will burn fuel. And in general, your priority will always be alcohol, burn that fast, and you'll burn the fat last. So if you're trying to get rid of belly fat, because of how alcohol works, you'll actually increase belly fat and have a hard time burning it if you drink alcohol. So we know the other harms of alcohol, but just from a ab and visceral fat, that fat around your organs perspective, it's a disaster to be an alcohol drinker. So if you're a drinker, don't drink often. And if you have what Vernon suggests he has, some addictive tendencies, you probably want to let it go altogether. He also mentioned that he was a night shift worker when he worked in this previous profession. Are you still doing that work now?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Part-time.
He's still
Yes.
doing it part-time. So in that type of night shift work, it can be disruptive to your circadian rhythm. So people who night shift work may have to work a little harder in order to avoid the negative effects of not being in the circadian rhythm. But at the end of the day, with the right support, which is why Vernon's a coach, there's a lot of things you can overcome. You just got to kind of know what it is you need to avoid and go from there. But when Vernon made these changes, I'm curious how his family responded, because if somebody came to my house and told me I couldn't eat any more sweet potato pie, I may be upset. So, but is your family doing a similar dietary pattern or version of it, and how have they embraced it?
My claim to fame is my two parents, my mom and my father. My mom is 76 now. She started this pretty much with me.
Mm-hmm.
She decided to go on the journey with me. And my father, 68, and he started a little bit after us, but he went down the same journey with us too. I just basically had to educate
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
I they had type 2 diabetes for many years, and they got pretty big
Mm-hmm.
because they've both lost 50 pounds now. They've sustained it, and they've sustained their blood sugar levels with just taking one dose of metformin per day, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
uh, I just recently switched my mother to inositol due to the mTOR
Mm-hmm.
factors and the protein synthesis. I want her to have that lean muscle mass to keep going. So I didn't want the metformin to get in the way of that. And they both maintained this steady blood sugar levels, and their A1Cs are now steadily around 5.6, 5.7 when they used to be up over sixes and sevens. And yeah, when I first learned this, they were shocked,
Mm-hmm.
that to hear everything that they were told, just like me. We've all been programmed to believe a certain thing. So to hear that basically everything is the exact opposite
Hmm.
is a hard pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where the education comes in, and leading by example, seeing the changes that I made personally in my life and seeing how my body transformed gave them the example that they needed to see that there was a way, like you said earlier about hope.
Mm-hmm.
How many years have they been going down this road, and the doctor says keep doing what you're doing, and here's some more medicine,
Right.
just up the dose, because the insulin receptors are getting more damaged year by year, so the medicine doesn't work as well, so just up your dose until ultimately you're injecting insulin into yourself. Then there's no way out. And they definitely were scared of that scenario going down. So they made the change and went on the journey with me. And yes, I was basically their everyday coach almost. And the other thing too that I forgetting to mention here is connection.
Mm-hmm.
I'm their son. So who else are they going to trust more than their own son? So they have that built-in trust with me. And that as a coach, we need to make connections with people to create sustainable change. Without that connection, they're not going to want to do anything. So with that being said, they trusted me, and the proof's in the pudding. The blood work shows it, and they're happy now. That they've got this new lifestyle that they can sustain. They enjoy their food without guilt. When you take away the guilt, you eat all that fat that's on that steak or that pork belly, and it's so good. It tastes good for a reason. Your brain's telling you that's good for you.
That's right.
And then you contrast that with sugar. That tells you it's good for you too, but that's for a different reason. It's for storing fat in case of food scarcity for survival. But in our modern society, with carbohydrates aplenty, your body is, give me more to keep storing for that winter when there's no food. But there is no winter coming. There's only food coming. So that's when biology has worked against us, and we have to educate. I like this term, the educate, not medicate. So if we can educate the population, nobody likes to be a sucker or be swindled. And we have been, as a whole society, by the food companies, by the nutritional guidelines that have been created, and they're still fighting against us today, trying to shadow ban us on YouTube and shape the narrative the way they want. So we must get this message out of the truth. People need to hear the truth because they're not hearing this message. They're believing that it's the genetics, that they're destined, that their parents are diabetic. No, you're eating the same food that they ate, and they showed you to eat that way. That's the real root cause. So if we can educate everybody that we've been made a fool of, we can counter the narrative because there's a way out of this thing. I've done it. You've done it. And little by little, I like to always quote this from Prof. Noakes. He said, the battle will be long and hard fought, but in the end, we will be victorious because we are telling the truth. They are not.
And the truth is easy to proclaim when you see example after example after example of success and how lives are being changed. So it warms my heart to hear how you express a simple concept. Your body craves the fat, so don't be afraid of it. But you did it in the context of saying we sometimes crave sugar. But we, in the context of our current state, don't need the sugar because there's no winter. There's no winter fast like the polar bear. And I just think people need to understand that and just let that settle into their brains. And I really appreciate how you express that. I am in a large health system in 6 states, and it is my mission to not just spread this message throughout a YouTube channel or a podcast or at the symposium for metabolic health or Keto Palooza or Keto Orlando or wherever, is to reach people who live in a conventional world because their insurance may put them in that world. So if we can reach people in that setting as well, And I do believe Professor Noakes is correct. I think that the science is clear, the evidence is clear, and the message just hasn't been shared broadly enough. And even with the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, as I'm privileged to chair their outreach committee, we are just adamant about being able to reach more people. And I'm just excited because when I get that patient in front of me who had not heard this before, it tells me that we have a lot more work to do. So I really appreciate what you're doing. Now, let me ask you this. I know you said you're kind of known for what you've been able to do for your parents. And I think you should be known because so many people I know have not been able to do that for whatever reason. And you would think that trust, this is my baby and my baby is not going to harm me, right? And you would think that that would be the thing, but so many people struggle. So I guess one quick question about coaching. What's been some of the hardest things you face as a coach in terms of being able to move people, or what challenges are you facing in that profession that's going to make it hard to get these messages to people?
Well, the number one challenge has to be addiction. So
Wow.
going back to sugar, carbohydrates, same thing, because they both become sugar in the blood.
Yeah.
And then it goes back to that biology circuit in the brain that wants you to keep eating it. You don't have that off switch. So that being said, that is the number one part is addiction, because most people develop, just like alcoholism, or go back to the casino thing, people get addicted to gambling. We get addicted to things. Human beings do. It's part of being human.
Yeah.
But with sugar, it causes all these effects, and the hard part is translating that to my clients so that they're self-aware of their addiction. It took them years, like I said with me, it took me years until I was up until my 30s to where it really started showing itself. And the people that I work with, type 2 diabetic or obesity or hyperinsulinemia, they've developed these things over time, and that means they've also eaten that way over time. And humans are creatures of habit, and it's my mission to get them to create new habits and patterns that they can sustain. But the hardest part is to get off the sugar, because the sugar is a narcotic. It's a drug, just like cocaine, except it doesn't mess your head up. Well, I can't say that. It does give you foggy brain over time. The neuroplasticity gets messed up. The wiring gets messed up, faulty wiring. And you get dopamine resistance because you're triggering dopamine all the time.
Yeah.
And over time, you need more and more to get that same sensation. So you remember, just like gambling, the first time you want to gamble more to get that sensation. Alcohol, you need to drink more to get that same sensation. Same thing with sugar. Only difference is sugar hasn't been labeled what it truly is, and it's a narcotic that should be used sparingly. And it's not getting that message out, because that's part of the battle, that we don't need sugar in our lives. We don't need sugar in all these substances to make it taste better. So you can buy more and get more sick. It's just such a vicious cycle. And yeah, that's the number one thing, is getting people to be self-aware that, yes, that's the real reason why I'm having a hard time putting this down. I'm addicted to it. And it's okay. It's part of our biology.
That's right.
I empathize with all these people. I've been through it myself. It's not going to be easy, but I'm there to give you the education and the tools to see your way out. And I promise everybody, if they take that journey, they'll start to feel better. Their brain will start to clear up. Their energy levels will go up. They'll start to feel like they used to. And then the whole issue of this is my destiny, or I'm destined like my parents to get this, goes away, because clearly it's not destiny. It's just what you eat. And we just need to show people that eating the right way will get you out of your vicious cycle. Break the cycle, please.
Wow. Who knew that a guy who struggled with alcohol would then find his solution in something that's very similar to alcohol, which is sugar, and just avoiding not just alcohol, but sugar as well. And some people still believe there is nothing called the sugar addiction. Some people still believe there's not a processed food addiction. But what's interesting about the alcohol history is that when Dr. Joan Iflin created her processed food addiction reset community, and if anybody has a processed food addiction, and don't forget sugar's processed food, you should check out Dr. Joan Iflin's book. She wrote the book on processed food addiction, and she obviously has a community that can support you. And it's clear from her research that addictions and processed foods are real, but just as importantly, when you think about the criteria, I think there's 11 criteria. Ironically, it's the same criteria we use to evaluate if you're alcoholic. It's the exact same question. So it's the same stuff. It's the same addiction. So everything you're saying resonates with me. But then you have people who say, Doc, I'm not, in your case, coach, I'm not addicted to sugar, Doc. I do want to be metabolic healthy. I love sugar. So when you have people you're coaching in front of you who feel like, Doc, I'm going to the gym and I'm going to eat this piece of cake and I'll just work it out. So what would you say to people who plan to use exercise as a way to justify eating the things that they shouldn't?
Great question. And I'm perfect example of that question. Never stopped working out. Never did.
Never stopped.
Never stopped. And I still ballooned to 215 pounds.
You had a carb belly even when you were working out.
And I actually, towards the latter half of that, I was working out more, doing more cardio, thinking the more cardio I do, the more calories that I'll burn. I'll get rid of the fat. Man, I bought those waist slimmer neoprene. You wrap them around and it makes you sweat more.
Yeah.
It keeps the heat in, so you sweat more. So I thought, okay, that's going to help me lose my belly. Didn't work.
Didn't work.
Electroshock belt. Sure, it probably strengthened my abs, but it's not going to get rid of that carb belly. Because once again, we must go back to human physiology and how the body works. This whole notion, I just did a post about calories in, calories out. And then we heard at the symposium from Dr. Michael Eads about mass in, mass out, which I didn't hear of this theory before. So I took a deep dive into it, and it makes perfect sense because it works on the hormonal model side of it. So if we just go to the hormones first, once you eat sugar, it stimulates insulin. What is insulin? A fat storage hormone, and it makes you grow or grow muscles. So once you have that bite of cake, turns on the switch for the insulin, therefore no access to fat as energy. It's pretty simple as that. If you want to get rid of fat, you have to keep the insulin low. And then that goes to the other hormone called glucagon, which allows you access to that fat to be used as energy. So the answer, long-winded answer, is that you eat that cake, you don't have access to the fat, so you can't outrun or outwork out a poor diet. The only way to truly get rid of the fat is by keeping the sugar out, so you get into ketosis, live the ketogenic lifestyle. Then all that fat will melt away.
I love it. And you mentioned glucagon. I heard somebody recently mention that hormone, and they said you remember it because it works when glucose is gone. And it kind of
Yes.
sounds like, I thought that was really interesting to hear it. I had never heard anybody say it that way, but I like that way of anything to help me remember something. That's what I'm good. I'm a big fan of that for sure. Um,
Shout
you
out
have,
to shout out to Corey for that one.
yeah, is that where that came from? Okay.
Yeah,
Corey,
yeah.
now who is, tell the audience who Corey is.
He's a physical trainer, owner of Boundless Body. Him and his wife work out of Utah,
Yeah.
and I was on his podcast recently, and
Got you.
he told me about Glucagon.
Yeah, I like that. And shout out to him. We'll let him own that. And we just want
Yeah.
people to hear it because anything to help you kind of connect the dots and know what that is, insulin, etc. One more thing. This is for all the people who are still out here looking at your abs. We'll probably use your abs on a thumbnail or something just so people can see it. Because we're shallow people. We like things like this. My assumption is that if we understand that getting rid of the carbs will help get rid of the visceral fat and shrink your belly, but there's still muscles and things under the skin that maybe make the abs look like a board, right? So talk a little bit about your exercise regimen. How often do you exercise to maintain that? I think people need to hear that as well.
Okay. I exercise every day,
Mm-hmm.
so I do routine every single day. I like to also quote Arnold Schwarzenegger, the man. He always says, "Do you brush your teeth every day? Do you eat every day? Do you drink water? Do you sleep? Well, you should also work out every day too."
Wow.
So it just makes sense, right? So I work out every day. I start my routine in the morning. I don't for when I wake up, I start my routine. I want to, because in the morning when you're in the ketogenic lifestyle, you have an extra amount of glucose
Mm-hmm.
flowing from your liver to wake you up, to get your day going. Your cortisol stress levels are
Yeah.
highest in the morning, and it's fine. You just wake up, let yourself wake up, because everybody's go-to is to get caffeine first thing in the morning. And from Dr. Huberman, his opinion is wait at least 2 hours after you wake up. Let that sugar go
Yeah.
away and the stress levels go before you have that first caffeine. So I follow that, and my routine is basically inversion. I use inversion. I do some yoga stretches, some Nordic lunges. Um, that's my in the morning routine, and then I'll have my supplemental coffee drink
Mm-hmm.
a couple hours or so after I wake up. Then I do some infrared sauna. After that, I do a little. I'll maybe do some cardio after that. But I also, when I'm doing my resistance training, which I do that as well every day, I follow Dr. Ben's 15 Minutes to Fitness. I follow his. I don't do it exactly the way he does it, but
Mm-hmm.
I follow the principle, which is work out to failure
Mm-hmm.
and hold the isometric holds for 3 to 5 seconds. And on the release, also release very slowly, because the body doesn't need all this a half hour, an
Mm-hmm.
hour of working out. It just
Yeah.
needs that signal. So when we're working out every day and we're putting that stressor signal, your body has to react. And it has to it'll get stronger, build muscle if it has that signal. So absent of that signal, then your body will start to eat away at the muscle and store fat instead. So that's in a nutshell. That's basically my routine. Then for dinner I'll have usually a pound of red meat or pork, and then I'll follow that up with my little snack, which is like a pound of cottage cheese with strawberry strawberry whipped cream cheese and pork rinds. So I kind of make that into kind of my keto cereal in a way,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and that's pretty much my daily routine until I go to sleep.
That's cool. I think you lost some people when you said every day you exercise, and then you gained some people back when you said Dr. Ben Bokikio, because his 15 minutes to, fitness book.
Three days, yeah. His
Yeah.
3 days a
Yeah.
week is
Right.
sufficient.
Right.
And
Right. So
that,
it's
that
not,
that's true. That's
yeah, it's
true.
not, well, it won't be as intimidating, but I really want to hear you talk about this because, um, I think when I looked it up, and I think only like less than 10% in America achieve washboard abs, right? So just to get a feel for what would it take if that's somebody's goal. For me, it's all about metabolic health. I don't really care as much, but we always want to look and feel good. Real quick, what do you put in your coffee? Because you mentioned coffee, and I do Huberman's advice. I did that experiment too, and I absolutely, at least anecdotally, agree with him, because when I did the experiment and waited a couple hours, I didn't the coffee didn't impact me. Like, I didn't have that letdown.
Hmm.
It worked. So, so again, I don't drink coffee every day though, but I'm curious what you put in your coffee.
It's a big cocktail.
Okay.
Because I'm a big supplements guy.
Okay, cool.
The ketogenic lifestyle, you don't need supplementation.
That's right.
I want to put that out there
Right.
first.
Right. Yeah.
I'm myself personally, and what I like to promote to everyone is to get the most optimal health as possible.
Yes.
So that's where supplementation comes in. So as we age, all these supplements, all these amino acids start to
Mm-hmm.
degrade over time. So that's where supplementation comes in. So I started doing creatine,
Mm-hmm.
taurine, branch chain amino acids, collagen, peptides, colostrum,
Mm-hmm.
um, 1 tablespoon of butter,
Mm-hmm.
and one raw egg. And then I steam some whole milk, and then I put it all in a blender.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
that's my I can't live without that drink. It's my daily thing.
That's what you do.
Yes, that's what I do.
Now, in my previous life, I've delivered over 700 babies. Okay. So I'm really a family doctor with some advanced training in obstetrics, C-sections, tubules. I did all of that stuff. Now I'm more of a geriatrician. I take care of older patients primarily. But when I was a resident doctor, when I hear the term colostrum, I think about what the babies get from their moms, right? So what made you add colostrum as one of the things that you would supplement with?
Well, it's due to it's called immunoglobulins.
Mm-hmm.
So in the
Mm.
colostrum milk, you get these immunoglobulins,
Yep.
which help the gut create glutathione, and that's an antioxidant, master antioxidant. So that's what it's all about, is creating a great gut bacterial environment
Mm-hmm.
that's supercharged to go up against any of these illnesses that come up, because natural immunity is king. And I want to build natural immunity in myself, get my vitamin
That's
D in
right.
order. All that stuff needs to be in check so that we don't have to rely upon medicine to combat these illnesses unless it's completely necessary.
Nice. Now, I've again trained in obstetrics, master's in nutrition, functional medicine, metabolic doc, low carb doc, had never thought to use colostrum. And so you're teaching. This is important because one of the things I love, as I hear young people in the background, one of the things that I love about this community is you don't have to be a doctor, you don't have to be a researcher, don't have to be a nurse, pharmacist. You just got to be interested in learning. And even with that, um, we have the Nutrition Network to help us learn. We have the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, Low Carb USA, to help us learn. So I really appreciate these conversations because it'll poke me a little bit to do a little bit more research on that particular part of your supplementation, the colostrum. But I thought that was fascinating. Wasn't expecting to hear that, but that's amazing. So appreciate you. Um, let's talk really briefly about that diagnosis of diabetes. And one of the things that we shared in your intro is that you help people reverse type 2 diabetes. So, in your experience now that you're doing this work, how often are you seeing people have success reversing type 2 diabetes with keto?
I've had great. It The great thing about doing this is that if you're a good coach, they don't need you for too long.
Right. That's right.
You just got to show them the way if you're doing your job right. And I use this tool called the Keto Mojo. I'm sure you're
Yes.
familiar with it. So I use that in my practice. It's a ketone and blood glucose monitor, the little finger prick monitor that you can check yourself at home. And that that tool is priceless for me because it keeps us both disciplined.
Hmm.
Because if they're not eating what they're supposed to be eating, the results will show themselves right
That's right.
away.
That's right.
So they themselves can't hide from what they're doing. So it keeps us both focused and in check. So with that, I've been able to use that tool tremendously to help coach people through that. And then the other great caveat is it's almost like a game
Hmm.
where you have a bad score and you want to get a better score the next time.
Right. Right.
And you don't want to let your coach down, or you don't want to let yourself down. So you want to do better every time. And with those tools, I've helped various people reverse. And as far as I know, nobody's gone back yet,
Wow.
thankfully.
Do you find that measuring ketones and glucose are better doing it that way versus just focusing on the glucose and counting carbs?
Oh, yeah, it's imperative because you can have a low glucose score and be in the normal range, but then your ketones score will be low as well. I'll give you an example of one of my client. She was eating correct, but her insulin levels were still persisting to be high enough to where her glucose was in the 80s, give or take, and she was getting ketone levels very low. She wasn't in nutritional ketosis, which is 0.5 or higher, and she was staying in the 0.1s and the 0.2s. So it took a consistent effort and her limiting more of her alcohol consumption to right that ship.
Yeah.
And then her ketone levels finally raised up above that magic number. And then, yeah, it showed her the way. So without that ketone monitor level, we would have never seen it. We wouldn't have known when that metabolic switch finally occurred, because we want to be fat adapted, and it takes time. It usually takes around a month or so, give or take, maybe longer at times, depending on the person. But you would never see, if you didn't check your ketone level, you wouldn't be able to see it in real time, that metabolic switch. So it's a very essential tool to have.
Okay, cool. If you, when I think about your knowledge, right, which is more than the average person, clearly you're training with the Nutrition Network Group, Professor Tim Noakes, who we all admire and appreciate for his sacrifices. You think about all of this great knowledge. So it's almost like what you've learned has had a tremendous impact on your ability to do the work you do, but more importantly, to heal and to help other people heal. So if Professor Tim Noakes if he magically showed up on this podcast right now, and I say, hey, he wanted to say hi to you, what would you say to him and to the Nutrition Network, I guess, as a way to appreciate what they've done for you in terms of your knowledge?
Well, thankfully, I've actually lived this before. I've been able to tell them both, the Nutrition
Oh,
Network and Prof Notes
cool.
personally. His story resonated with me so much resonated so much to me because his father passed from type 2 diabetes, and he was afraid about himself when he got type 2. And man, I tend to get emotional when I think about this, because with the knowledge that I've learned from Nutrition Network and Prof Noakes, I've been able to teach my parents who are elderly and reverse their type 2 diabetes. And that has given them a quality of life that would have never existed if I didn't learn these things and was able to teach them these things. So I've told them this already, but I'll say it again from the bottom of my heart. What I've learned is priceless, and it's allowed me to change my parents' lives for the better. And now it's given me this mission in life to help be part of the healing of the planet, this ketogenic revolution that I hope takes over. They can't keep holding us back because it's working. And there's nothing else that's working. So if we can keep this up and we change, this has been able to change my family for the better. So family by family, we need to stop this culture that's been created of we're destined. It's our genetics. The narrative needs to switch. That good analogy of that we're all born with the seeds of either storing more fat or not. But if you don't feed those seeds, they'll never grow. And those seeds are diabetes and obesity and cancer. So as long as we don't give it sugar, we'll all be better off, because we were a totally different species pre 1977 guidelines. We weren't what we are today.
Mm-mm.
And that's not our fault. We were tricked and sold a bill of goods to make companies money. And it's sad to say, but it feels like we're just become farmed like animals from birth to death. And they've extracted the most amount of money out of us, and then they'll keep us alive with medicine. And now, before, I didn't believe the conspiracy theory, but it almost kind of, it's like maybe they want us to die before we can collect our Social Security. Right?
Well,
I really hope that's not the case, but
yeah, it feels like it sometimes. And none of us were born with a medication deficiency. There is no such medical condition. Yes, Dr. Hampton, you have a deficiency of a particular medication. That does not exist. And if we understand how to feed our body with the proper human diet, well, most of us will find healing. Most of us will never get these so-called chronic medical conditions. So when you speak with emotion and you mention Professor Tim Noakes and Nutrition Network with emotion, it doesn't surprise me. As someone who's also taken those courses, the ones that strike me the most is when he goes back and talk about the history of, man and why our brains are large and those types of lectures that he's given. And he shares his testimony of how he was endorsing carb loading and things like that as a marathon run. And he was honest enough to say something's wrong. And he was honest enough to turn the ship in a different direction, his life ship. And then he's now spreading the message to others. And we will never look at someone who has a different dietary pattern that has served them and is doing well with that dietary pattern. But what we won't accept is living in a world where we can help heal people with low carb, keto, or carnivore. And we're being told we can't share that message. We will break those doors down and we will fight into our last breath because there are too many people who will benefit if we get this message in front of them. So when you think about the future, how do you view the future? How optimistic are you about the future, having made the comments you just made?
I will always be optimistic for the future. Always. It may look bleak now, but we're making a difference. I've been on this journey for 3+ years and been to the symposiums and learned so much. And I'm one of many.
Yeah.
And with the podcast revolution, people are searching for knowledge other than mainstream sources. And, people like Joe Rogan and others are putting out information that would not normally be there if these podcasts weren't around, like Chafee, like Saladino.
Right.
I learned so much from all these people. Low Carb Down Under, Paul Mason. There's so many others to list, and we just need to stay optimistic because they're touching millions of people.
That's right.
So then it always goes back to the addiction side of it and people not wanting to change. But people don't know that there's an option out there that they can get healed with.
Yeah.
And so that's the other message. I personally want to use my credentials. I'm going to try to do some lectures at my daughter's public school, volunteer my time to try to change the narrative, because I'm seeing my daughter's fellow classmates, and it's sad. Some of the kids are already obese in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and The lunchroom serves a lot of carbohydrates. They don't serve whole milk, processed foods, and it's those are the type of things, like with the Nutrition Coalition trying to help change the narrative. And if we can get the nutritional guidelines changed, that would be one of the biggest steps. That's a roadblock when it comes to all these government facilities, because they have their hands tied to these guidelines that are incorrect. Because going back to addiction again, the food companies got their webs into the schools, offering money for donations for this or that, so they can sell their soda pop and their chips and all that junk. So it's smart on their part. They make money, and then the kids get addicted in school and home. So they develop this addiction and they carry it into their adulthood for the rest of their lives. The food companies just to get to make money off of them all the way through. So if we can make a concerted effort to change the school, teach the children and their parents that there's a different way. That's I want to try to focus on that to try to make a significant change, at least at the ground level. I'm going to definitely try that.
Yeah, well, all your words resonate with me, and when you start talking about our babies in school, I called you a baby earlier because that's how your parents view you, but our actual babies that
We're
we
all
have
big
created,
babies,
we're
right?
big babies. That's right, and I'm okay with that. And but yeah, we want to make sure they have a chance at a healthy life. And man, if we can teach them at an early age, it's likely that our grandbabies and great grandbabies will also do well. So I really appreciate that. And are there other areas as it relates to protecting your nest that you plan to focus on beyond the nutrition and the exercise that you plan to focus on over the next year or so? How are you feeling about that? Any other areas to focus on?
I would say this goes to the holistic side of things. I develop I'm an all of the above guy. So another big thing is breathing through your nose.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people neglect that, and then they get obese, and then they can't breathe through their nose anymore, and then you got the CPAP machines. I read this great book by James Nestor, Breathe, and that changed my life. And also Dr. Mark's Run for Your Life, using minimalist shoes, because shoes put you out of balance. So go to minimalist shoes, get the strength back in your feet. Sure, you'll go through some pain for a couple weeks, but once your feet get used to it, you get stronger. So breathing, wearing the shoes. There's a device. I got right here. You put it in your mouth. It restricts your breathing in. You can actually develop strength in your lungs.
Wow. Right. Wow.
Once again, this goes to stressors. Put your body under stress, your body reacts, and it gets stronger. So we can work out all these things. And I've just become addicted to doing that for myself, because I want to teach this to everybody. We can grow old but still have a good athletic quality of life. We're not destined to go into walkers and wheelchairs. As long as we use what we got, we'll be good. We eat the right way. We can still do things with our kids when we're grandparents. People like to talk about modern medicine extending longevity, yes, but what kind of quality of life is that extension of your longevity? Are you in a wheelchair? Are you taking all these medications just to keep your blood sugar in control? If you're one of those things, your quality of life is probably not the greatest. Yes, you're alive, but are you really enjoying life like you should? That's my greatest fear. is growing old and not being able to do what I used to. So I embrace that fear and the challenge. And like my mom's 76 and my dad's 68, my goal is at least get them to 100.
Mm-hmm.
They laugh about it, but I'm being serious.
Man,
So
you inspire me, man. I need to call my mom after this. That is, I think, something we all hope for, and you have really inspired me today to at least continue to make efforts to reach family. Who better to reach than the people who are the closest to you? So I really appreciate that. That means a lot to me. People need to hear your voice, and those who need more need to maybe make you their coach. So how can people find you if they need those services?
I'm at www.transparenthealthfitness.com. You can message me there, give me a call or a text. I'll be happy to help.
That's what I'm talking about. So we will obviously make the links available. Definitely appreciate you, man. It's something interesting about meeting somebody at, symposium, and it's more interesting that I get to actually know you by recording a podcast. It's kind of funny to me. So I feel like I know you so much more now, and I appreciate you. And I know we'll be doing work in the future. Hopefully some of my patients may find your services helpful as well. So, but just keep spreading this good message of hope. Keep helping people as much as you can. I'm going to do the same. And hopefully tomorrow will be better than yesterday. So thank you so much, Vernon, for joining me today on the episode of the Protecting Your Nest podcast, my friend. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Tony. Thank you so much.
No problem. And I am, as I speak to my audience, today we had a chance to be inspired by Vernon, who, when he faced struggle, didn't give in to the struggle, but faced the struggle head on. And even more impressive, when he benefited from keto, he then looked at his parents and said, I love you guys. I want you guys to be here at least to 100. What can I do? Right? What can I do to help support you on that journey? And they faced their struggle, and they took his hand and they walked together as a family. So if you're facing struggle, I need you to be patient, but I also need you to be persistent. And maybe even just a positive outlook, because there are too many people healing metabolically in the world. So why not you? No matter what your life situation is, no matter how hard times are, if you have the right mindset and you practice over and over again the right lifestyle, I think you'll be able to overcome anything you face, and you'll be so much better for it. That's what you deserve, and that's what your family deserves. So my hope is that today's episode provided some inspiration, some perspective about struggle, about what a carb belly is, and all the things we talked about. And I hope it leads to more conversation so that you and your family can continue to walk towards metabolic health. So for those who joined us today, if you like this episode, share. If you're watching on YouTube, like it, comment, and just let the world know how you're healing metabolically so that they can be inspired, not just by our words, but by your words. So I always feel grateful that I have this platform to share great guests and great messages. And until the next episode of the Protecting Your Nest podcast, I ask that you continue to be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest. You've been listening to Protecting Your Nest with Dr. Tony Hampton. For more, visit drtonyhampton.com.